Good afternoon, everyone. I have a caveat that I have to pronounce before tonight's Dvar Torah, that I do not mean anything political, and that it doesn't involve any individual, and that the shul is always above politics, which would be a good idea for the entire country. So I don't want to be misunderstood. But yesterday, Dr. Rosen mentioned to me a Rashi, and I thought about it all day. So if you don't like it, you blame him.
Okay.
It says in the parsha, Asher Nosi Yecheta. Asher meaning when it will be, that the leader of the people, the Torah doesn't describe him as a melech, the Torah describes him as a Nosi. In fact, we find throughout the Chumash, the Nesiim, the heads of the tribes. Moshe, according to the Medrash, according to Chazal, had a din of melech. But we don't find that the Torah called him a melech. So, Asher Nosi Yecheta, if the head of the people so it describes the Nosi. The Nosi had to bring a special korban over and above different the chatos that an ordinary citizen would bring for committing a sin. The Torah requires that the Nosi brings a special korban. Right. Now, what is strange about this pasuk is the first word, Asher. It should say simply, Kishe Nosi Yecheto, when the Nosi sins. So therefore, Chazal saw in it, and Rashi quotes it. Asher is from the same word as Ashrei, which we say 3 times a day. Ashrei literally means fortunate. Osher with an aleph is good fortune. It's not necessary, the difference between, I don't know how to put it, the difference between luck. So we don't ascribe anything to luck, but there is something called good fortune that the Rebbeinu Shalom gives us. Good fortune is something that we don't really deserve, that we haven't really earned. So for instance, that's what we say, Ashrei Yoshvei Veisecha. Good, how fortunate are those that sit in your house. Now, what's the great accomplishment? What did you do? But the Torah sees it as being a stroke of good fortune that you're able to sit in the house of the Rebbeinu Shalom. So therefore, Rashi says, Asher here also is Meloshon Ashrei. How fortunate is a generation that it has a leader that admits to his wrongs and brings a korban chatos. Now we see throughout Tanakh that the Torah never expected perfect people. Only we expect perfect people. But the Torah never demanded it, never thought of it. I remember somebody once called me up in the middle of the night. He wanted information on a shidduch, and I was not in the mood. And he's hocking me a Chinese with this, that, the family, and what, this, all the nonsense. So he said, well, tell me something wrong about the family. So I said, the great grandfather passed away. I mean, what do you want from my life? But people expect perfection. We expect perfection in a shidduch. We expect perfection in a job. We expect perfection in the society. And we certainly expect it from our leaders. So we have to be therefore. And we have many, many examples of that in our society. We're all human beings. The Torah didn't want more than that. And therefore, you find throughout Tanakh, Moshe Rabbeinu is not above criticism. I mean, if I was writing a chumash about me, I wouldn't put it in. He hit the rock, he didn't speak to the rock, he got angry. His brother and sister had a quarrel with him. Why did the Torah put that in? Because the Torah wanted us to realize that we're dealing with human beings, and human beings are not perfect. And therefore, on the level of their greatness, we will say what their weakness was as well. You find it throughout Tanakh. I mean, David HaMelech. You have to put that story in. Still, he remains David HaMelech. He remains the progenitor of all of the Jewish future. But he's no longer perfect. Shlomo HaMelech builds the Beis HaMikdash, the wisest of all human beings. He's the greatest. Everybody comes to see him and visit him. And the Tanakh, Hito es Lavovo. It wasn't so good. Why does the Tanakh have to mention it? So we should know that the greatest kings that we had, David and Shlomo, were, so to speak, not perfect people. Nevertheless, their greatness endures. Because all human beings have different components. All human beings have greatness and they have pettiness. They have the ability to soar and be above things and to fall on minor details, on the poorest of things. Elio Hanavi, Kano Kinesi Lashem Tzvalkos. Elio is the Malach HaBris. Elio is, we're going to have in Pesach. He's the Mavasar HaGeula. But the Tanakh, it says, Elio was reprimanded. Malach Elio, God says to him, what's with you? Why do you always look for the weaknesses in the Jewish people? Why are you such a zealot? That's why Chazal said Elio is at Pinchas. You have that trait. Tanakh rejects it. On Mordechai, says Rotzin Larov Echov. most of the Jewish people held that Mordechai was great. Rashi says, Rovechov. But there were those in the Sanhedrin who said, no, he wasn't, he was Mavakel Torah. He didn't show up at the yeshiva to say the shir. Moti. Why? Mordechai is writing the Megillah. He should say, period. But anything that's in Kisrei HaKodesh is 100% honest. It's 100% real. And therefore, it's should know there's no perfect leader. Somebody gets 99.8% of the vote, you know you're living in a totalitarian state. You know that the vote is worthless. So expectations are always in order. And we have to hold people to standards. And laws are laws. And Isurim are Isurim. But when it comes to the judge, Ashrei Ador, fortunate is the generation that can have a leader that is not perfect and who can admit to the fact that he is not perfect and that the generation can bear it. He still remains the Nasi even though he's not perfect. That's a very, very telling idea. And all of the publicity that tries to create perfection really is counterproductive, therefore, because it's not the reality of what people are and what the situation is, and therefore what progress can be. Because if you're imagining perfection, you are doomed not just to disappointment, but to very counterproductive behavior. So that's one of the lessons in this week's Parsha. And if it didn't meet with your approval, it's Dr. Rosen that suggested it.
Hey.